So most people aren't actually feeling their life. They're trying to think their way through it, and those are not the same thing. I didn't even realize that I was doing this for a long time. I thought I was really aware. I thought I was paying attention. I thought I really understood what was going on in my life. But what I was actually doing was narrating everything in my head. Those stories that we tell ourselves. I was thinking about what I was feeling. I was analyzing what I was feeling. I was explaining what I was feeling. I was really just trying to make sense of it. And that can look like self-awareness, but it's not the same thing as being in your experience. Because when you're in your head, you're slightly outside of your life. You're slightly detached from the feelings of your life. And it looks like, like when you're having a conversation with someone, and instead of actually being there with them in the conversation, you're thinking about what you're going to say next. How many of us are guilty of that? I know I have a tendency to do that. Like you can be sitting with someone that you really care about. You're interested in them, but a part of you is there, a part of you is listening, and another part of you is analyzing the interaction. Like, okay, did I sound stupid? How did they receive that? What's going on? Do they like me? Or even when you're alone, my mind is constantly narrating, planning, replaying over and over again. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There are just really good reasons that we have learned to live there. And for a lot of us, thinking became a way to stay safe. If you grew up in environments where, emotions weren't safe, where things were unpredictable, you had to figure things out really quickly, your mind became the place where you went to stay in control. And it works until it doesn't. Because the longer that you live in your head, the harder it is to actually feel your life, to really experience your life, to really be turned on to your life. And when you're not feeling your life, everything starts to feel a little flat, a little disconnected. Even if everything looks fine on the outside. So when people say things like, I just don't feel alive anymore, or I've lost that zest for life, or that connection to life, or I just feel kind of numb. A lot of times it's not because something is missing, it's because they're not actually in their experience. They're thinking about the experience, and the shift is not stop thinking, because that's not realistic. Like we are thinking creatures, analytical creatures. But, the shift is to start to notice when you've left your experience, and then gently bringing yourself back. And it can be really small. It can start with just noticing your breath. Noticing what your body feels like sitting in your chair, or noticing the tone of someone's voice, instead of planning your response. So we're not really trying to change anything. We're just coming back. We're coming into full presence with our life. And for me, this is where things really started to change. It's not when I figured everything out, because good luck on that, but when I actually started being here, being in the moments, in these small moments over and over again. And if you're noticing that you spend most of your time in your head, there is a reason for that, and it didn't happen by accident. And the next step isn't just noticing it, it's understanding what's happening in your body when you start to come back, when you start to become fully present. Because that's where a lot of people get stuck, and that's why my next video is going to be about just that.